Hello everybody, and thank you for joining me. I am the Why Guy, and this is my very first episode ever. So, good place to start would be, why the Why Guy? The answer is curiosity and propaganda. So I'm a very curious person. Whenever I hear something that doesn't quite make sense to me, I can't help but go down a rabbit hole on it, just dig and find the source. So, for instance, when I hear that terrorists attacked us on 9/11 for our freedom, I can't help but think that that sounds kind of cartoonish and a little ridiculous. So you go to the source. What do they say? Why do they say they hate us and attacked us? Turns out it's not for our freedom. So that's just one in a sea of lies that we're told all the time. Propaganda is all around you, as it has been in every empire, every country with a major government throughout history, as far as I can tell. And this country's no different. So once you start seeing it, you really can't stop seeing it. This is why Republicans just think Democrats want power and Democrats think Republicans just hate poor people. Look, people are people. And most people are a product of the information that they have. And most people's information is heavily filtered. And that's what propaganda is about. It's not so much about everybody being in on it. Okay, all these people colluding. It's about filtering the news through advertisers, through just one guy, the editor, making sure certain news stories don't hit the air. All right, now don't get me wrong. You are lied to. All right, Sean Hannity is a real person. But it's more than that. It's about filtering the news and making the right hiring decisions. So a great example of this is Brian Stelter, okay? Brian Stelter is a propagandist and a liar. He lies to his audience every night, obviously. But he might not know it. Brian Stelter legitimately might just be an idiot. But somebody hired that idiot. And whoever did was obviously not hiring for IQ or competence or journalistic integrity. So what were they hiring for? I would say they're looking for somebody who already has the right opinions. So while a lot of my videos are going to be more in depth and we're really going to do a deep dive, one subject at a time, this video we're going to take a little bit more of a shotgun approach and just speed through some items. The sources in this video and in all of them will be in the description, so feel free to do more follow-up yourself. But some low-hanging fruit, some historical propaganda. Let's start with the Gulf of Tonkin incident. So this is the prototypical false flag operation, all right, where we use some big lie as pretext to get into war. In this case, it was the war in Vietnam. So what really allowed us to ramp up that war was something called the Gulf of Tonkin incident, where one of our destroyers was allegedly in the Gulf of Tonkin outside Vietnam, and it was supposedly attacked by torpedo boats in the middle of the night. Turned out that it was a lie. They didn't attack us at all. Our generals knew that at the time. This is now on the U.S. Naval Intelligence website. I've linked it in the description. There's really no disputing this one at this point. We lied our way into the Vietnam War. Far more damning than the Gulf of Tonkin incident is something called Operation Northwoods. Now, I've linked to this in the description. It is fully declassified. You may or may not have heard of it, but we were going to do another false flag attack on one of our own territories and blame it on the Cubans as a pretext to go to war with Cuba. This was proposed by the Joint Chiefs of Staff to John F. Kennedy. Thank God he didn't go through with it, but they were looking for war with Cuba because, you know, they're the Joint Chiefs. That's kind of what they do. So we were going to do things like paint an American F-86 in Cuban colors and bomb the Dominican Republic and blame it on Cuba. We were going to stage an attack on Gitmo, our base in Guantanamo Bay, and blame it on the Cubans. They were going to pretend there was a terrorist cell in Miami and set off bombs in Miami. They were going to fly a drone over Cuba, blow it up, and then pretend that it was a chartered flight full of college students. They even said in the documents that they were going to have fake funerals for the fake victims. All this pretext to go to war with Cuba by making the entire world see them as an irresponsible government. That's their words, not mine. Now, these two incidents are just what's been declassified decades later. Does anybody believe that these people regard themselves as public servants or have any interest in telling you the truth? All right, does anybody think that 60 years ago there weren't worse things going on that just haven't been declassified, or there aren't terrible things going on right now that won't be declassified for decades, if ever? Of course. Of course, nobody admits, especially if they're in a position of power, nobody admits the worst things they've ever done. I mean, look, O.J. Simpson admitted he was a bad husband, all right? But he was a way worse ex-husband. Well, let's move the timeline forward a little bit, shall we? Let's talk about some more modern examples. I think a good place to start would be Ukraine, October of 2014. There was a revolution. Some people might remember it. A pro-Putin leader was removed, and in his place, a pro-American leader was put. Now, some of you may remember this in the news. Specifically, you might remember that there was a leaked phone call that was reported about a month after this happened between Victoria Nuland, the Deputy Secretary of State at the time, and the American ambassador to the Ukraine. They had about a 5-minute phone call that was leaked. And everybody in America reported on this phone call, but what they reported on was a 5-second clip in which Victoria Nuland says,
and, fuck the EU.
All right, that's salacious or whatever, but what about the other 4.5 minutes of that phone call? Well, it turns out that the other 4.5 minutes of that phone call was about, now that we've overthrown the government of Ukraine, who are we going to put in power? And by the way, the guy they settled on, they said should be talking to a literal neo-Nazi 4 times a week. And these are the good guys? All right, there was a lot of news about how after this happened, Putin occupied the Crimea. But what they didn't report was that there was a referendum in the Crimea where they voted, 97% of them voted to become part of Russia instead of staying with Ukraine. And Putin said no. All right, and everybody can say, oh, well, the election was rigged or whatever. But does anybody think that if you're living in Crimea that you wouldn't want to go to Russia? Does anybody think, whatever you think of Russia, that Ukraine isn't a more corrupt and more poor place? And that hasn't changed since the revolution. So we got caught red-handed overthrowing a government on Putin's doorstep and inputting an American puppet who won't even trade with him. And all he does is occupy the Crimea. Can anybody imagine what we would do if we caught Putin red-handed overthrowing the government of Mexico and inserting a puppet who wouldn't even trade with us? We would go to war. We would take Cancun at least. I mean, we need that. All right? But he's not going to mess with us. All he did was occupy the Crimea because he can't do anything. We're a bully. All right? But we get caught red-handed doing this, and you don't hear about it on television? All right, we've been caught 85 times interfering in other people's elections since World War II, according to the UN. But how many of those have you heard of? And the only thing Sean Hannity feels that you need to know about the situation is that this woman said,
fuck the EU.
Really? This is a smoking gun. These people don't give a damn about telling you the truth. Does anybody here think that Sean Hannity or his production team didn't listen to the whole phone call? Does anybody think this guy is giving you honest news? I mean, look, if you detect some jealousy in my voice, the guy's got a great head of hair, but he can't tell the truth if he tries. Stop watching these people. Time for a thought experiment. I wonder how this leaked phone call was reported in Russia. Oh my God. Do those commie bastards have better information than us? Now, one of my favorite, or least favorite, depending on how you look at it, instances of propaganda are the Syrian chemical weapons attacks. So, a lot of people might remember in 2017 there was allegedly a chemical weapons attack carried out by Assad, the leader of Syria, in an area called Douma, Syria. This is one of the last strongholds of ISIS in that civil war at the time, and allegedly Assad used chemical weapons on his own people there. So, Donald Trump spent $110 million, mostly based on Facebook posts, like immediately when it happened. There's like some posts on Facebook about how this happened. And Donald Trump was like, all right, let's bomb somebody. So he spent $110 million bombing mostly anti-venom factories in a relatively poor country. Now, a lot of people might remember that. Even Democrats at the time were saying, Donald Trump really became president today. Okay, because nothing's more presidential than bombing brown people based on flimsy evidence. So a lot of people would have heard of that story, but most people probably have never heard the name Ian Henderson. Now, Aaron Mate has done a lot of very good reporting on this, but Ian Henderson was part of the fact-finding mission sent to Douma. So the OPCW, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, sent a fact-finding team to Douma, Syria after this chemical attack and after the bombing in retaliation, and tried to figure out what exactly had happened, what the scope of this chemical attack was. Well, the team on the ground found that there was no evidence of a chemical attack. So they made that report, and they brought out all of their scientific findings, all the readings of chlorine and any readings of sarin gas, which allegedly he'd used before. So they turned that report in, but the actual heads of the OPCW manipulated their report, redacted a bunch, took all of the science out, and just basically put in an abbreviated report that said, yep, chemical attack, chlorine gas used. Well, Ian Henderson started blowing the whistle immediately. Not only Ian Henderson, but there was another fact finder on that mission, both of them high-level, well-respected people within the OPCW, blew the whistle. Now, the second one has not come out and released his name publicly, but I have linked in the description to a testimony from Aaron Mate involving Ian Henderson at the UN years later, after all the bombings had happened and everything else. But, you know, the smoking gun here is not that Aaron Mate and Ian Henderson and this other guy are definitely telling the truth. Maybe they're not. Watch the video, judge for yourself. But the fact is that everybody was all in a tizzy when it looked like there might have been a chemical attack, but the moment Ian Henderson comes out and says, no, there was no chemical attack, the story dropped. None of you have ever heard Ian Henderson's name. Okay, but I'm sure everybody has heard that Assad has attacked his own people with gas. Why is it that this story got completely filtered out? How is it that some people have been reporting on this, but almost nobody in this country has ever heard Ian Henderson's name? That's what propaganda looks like. And when you look at the circumstances of this supposed chemical weapons attack, of course Assad didn't do it. He had control of 98% of the country. Duma was one of like the last 2 strongholds that was still controlled by ISIS. By the way, Duma was controlled by ISIS. Who do you think filmed that Facebook video that made it look like there was a gas attack? All right, but never mind that. 98% of the country he controls. Most analysts at the time were estimating that he was weeks away from winning the civil war. And you're telling me at that moment he chooses to do the one thing that will get the most powerful military in history involved against him? Forget being a madman. The guy's not an idiot, all right? You'd have to have a death wish. You can kill people with bombs, all right? You can kill people with bullets. Matter of fact, that's how he had gotten to 98% control of the country. But this is the moment when he decides to use gas attacks? Are you kidding me? But as anti-war as the left claims itself to be, Rachel Maddow didn't feel the need to tell you about Ian Henderson. And of course, this is the kind of thing you're not going to be allowed to hear. You know why? Because when the military-industrial complex can make money bombing brown people, they're going to do it. And when it turns out they shouldn't have done it, they're going to cover it up. Does anybody see a pattern here? Jamal Khashoggi was a Washington Post contributor and a Saudi Arabian dissident, and he was murdered by the Saudi Arabian government. That's not that controversial. If you've been keeping up with the news, you probably already knew that. My problem here is the way it was reported. All over television and on the internet, all you could find is articles saying things like, well, this puts Joe Biden in a tough position because, you know, Saudi Arabia, sure, they have some human rights abuses, but they're also a great ally, and they've been a bulwark against Middle Eastern extremism. That sentence, bulwark against Middle Eastern extremism, was all over the internet. It's in at least 5 articles that I've posted in the description. It was all over television. You hear it every time somebody covers the U.S.-Saudi relationship. And it is absurd. Saudi Arabia is a state sponsor of terrorism. They are the largest exporter in the world of terrorism, okay, rivaled only potentially by the U.S., depending on your perspective. Subject for another video. But ISIS and Al-Qaeda, worst people ever apparently, subscribe to a sect of Islam, Sunni Islam, called Wahhabism. Okay, this is the apocalyptic sect that is looking for a worldwide caliphate. It is the state religion of Saudi Arabia. They are spending state money to build these mosques all over the world. Okay, 15 of the 19 hijackers on 9/11 were Saudis. The only parts of the 9/11 report that haven't been decommissioned, that haven't been declassified, are the parts about Saudi Arabia's involvement. All right. This country is crazy, and the only reason nobody wants to talk about it is that they got us by the short hairs. All right, this country could crash our economy, could crash the dollar by 25% overnight if they wanted to through OPEC and the petrodollar. Also subject for another video. But they are terrible. Meanwhile, we're all supposed to be afraid of Iran. Iran? This is one of the most incompetent countries on the planet, all right? They can barely feed their own people. This is an oil-rich country that can barely pump enough oil from underneath their feet to satisfy their own needs. Actually, they can't. They've got rolling blackouts all the time. Last year, they actually blew up their own commercial jet over their capital with hundreds of people on board because they were so afraid that it might be a U.S. bomber. This is a real story, okay? This country is incompetent. All right, they are closer to Mr. Magoo than they are to Hitler. There is no chance of them threatening the U.S. There is no chance of them blowing Israel off the map, all right? I don't even think they have maps in this country. And this is who we're supposed to be afraid of? Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia gets a hall pass? All right, this is the point of my shirt. Weeks away from a nuke since 1992. This is propaganda. We've been hearing about how close this country is to a nuclear weapon and destroying Israel for literally 30 years, okay? Weeks away for 30 years. You're telling me we got to spend more money to stop these people? So look at this. You tell me, who's the bully? Who is the aggressor? Who has to be worried exactly? This is the country we're worried about? They can't throw a rock from their own border without hitting one of our soldiers. And this is the country we got to spend more military money defending against? Are you kidding? Amber Lyon is another good one. Who's Amber Lyon, you're asking? Exactly. This is a name you should probably know. Amber Lyon was a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist for CNN who was sent to Bahrain. Where's Bahrain? There it is. Amber went to Bahrain to do a story on the Bahrain government and how progressive they were relative to other countries in the region. She kind of found the exact opposite. They were beheading people for being gay. They were really terrible on women's rights issues. Go figure. So she wrote that story when she got home. Well, CNN wouldn't put it on CNN International where it was originally supposed to air. So she starts raising a fuss about it. Like, why wouldn't we report this everywhere? This is a bunch of atrocities I saw, terrible things. These things should be reported. She uncovers that the Bahrain government is paying CNN for positive stories, for positive spin. So she lost her job. She did a lot of radio interviews. She was screaming from the rooftops to anybody who would listen about this going on. But nobody picked up the story in the mainstream media. Even Fox News didn't pick up the story. So a media organization gets caught taking payments from a foreign government to do positive stories for that government. And even their biggest rival, Fox, did not pick this story up. What does that tell you? They're all doing it. And does anybody think that the Bahrain government is the only government doing this? Does anybody think that our government isn't doing this? Of course they are. Why else would Fox News, CNN's biggest competitor, biggest rival, they're supposed to be hated enemies, why would Fox News not sniff this story? They wouldn't touch Amber Lyon. I'm pretty sure Bill O'Reilly would have touched her. What does that tell you? The 2008 financial crisis is not something we're going to spend a tremendous amount of time on in this video. It's actually the subject of a future video that's coming out soon. But what I do want to touch on is that all you've probably heard is that this is the fault of capitalism. This is the free market run amok. This is the fault of deregulation. The fact is that for years leading up to the housing crisis, the Federal Reserve encouraged banks to give out as many loans as they could, and then the government, through regulations, regulated that the banks had to give loans to people who couldn't afford them and people with bad credit. This is the so-called subprime market that sunk the whole ship. And the government told them they had to do that. And then they said through Freddie Mae and Fannie Mac that they would actually bail these bad loans out if they went bad. And that's exactly what happened. All right, this is not the free market. This is not capitalism. This is the equivalent of me telling you, go sell your car, go sell your house, take all of the cash you can get your hands on and go to Vegas. And if you win money in Vegas, we'll tax you at 20%. If you lose all of the money you had, we'll just bail you out. We'll just replace it. We'll pay you back. Is there anybody on earth who's not at least that greedy? Is there anybody watching this video who wouldn't be on a plane to Vegas tonight? All right? Privatizing the profits and socializing the losses is not capitalism. It is not the free market. Sorry, Michael Moore, you're kind of an idiot. Freedom to succeed means freedom to fail. There is no such thing as too big to fail in a free market society. Now, the thing I love about old school America is that people were always on the lookout for tyranny. They were very distrustful of the government, right? So they had to kind of slide the Gulf of Tonkin incident under the radar, no pun intended. Operation Northwoods, they had to give it a few decades before they declassified it. I mean, they had a little respect for us back then, right? I mean, it's not like they're just going to come out and tell us they're propagandizing us. I mean, that'd be stupid, right? Right? Jen?
Well, first, we are in regular touch with these social media platforms, and those engagements typically happen through members of our senior staff, but also members of our COVID-19 team. In terms of actions, Alex, that we have taken, or we're working to take, I should say, from the federal government, we've increased disinformation research and tracking within the Surgeon General's office. We're flagging problematic posts for Facebook that spread disinformation.
We're flagging problematic posts for Facebook that spread disinformation.
We're working with doctors and medical professionals to connect to connected medical experts who are popular with their audiences with accurate information and boost trusted content. So we're helping get trusted content out there.
So let me get this straight. Joe Biden, who had to drop out of 3 presidential races before this last one because he was caught blatantly lying to the American people. Joe Biden, who has never been the smartest guy in any room he walked into, now that guy's got dementia. And he wins a popularity contest by clearing that high bar of being anybody but Donald Trump, and by promising enough of other people's shit away. Now that guy gets to be the ultimate arbiter of truth for 330 million people. Are you kidding me? Joe Biden doesn't know what state he's in right now, all right? The guy's been locked in his basement for the last 2 years, calling his wife Betty. He sleeps 18 hours a day and wakes up thinking he's a senator, all right? And this is the guy that gets to tell me whether or not the vaccine works? You think Joey B is in a fucking lab coat somewhere doing cell cultures? Joe Biden can't spell ivermectin, but he gets to tell my doctor whether or not it works? I'm out. I am all the way out. God, yeah, great idea. Let's let the people responsible for the Tuskegee experiments get to filter our truth. Yeah, what's the worst that could happen? You know, it's working for China. These people just spent $200 million a day for 18 years of your money trying to build a government in a country where the people living there don't believe they're a country. And when we left, that government collapsed in 48 hours. All that blood, all that time, all that money, all those lives bought us 48 hours. And these are your heroes? Yeah, what's the worst that could happen? No way that can go wrong. There's a few ways that can go wrong. In the 21st century, information is the most powerful tool on the planet. There's a small group of people trying to control and filter it to split us into 2 groups, because as long as you think that the real problem with America is your neighbor who has different opinions than you based on different information, then nobody's going to take a hard look at the real people who are destroying our communities from the inside. Red team versus blue team is a trap. Everybody loses. It's a purposeful trap to keep our eyes off the real issues, off the things that those in power are really doing. Democrats and Republicans at the top and in the media agree on 85 to 90% of issues, and those are the issues they will not touch on television because they are the most life-ending, wealth-destroying, poverty-creating issues on the planet, but somebody is benefiting. Those are the issues that we're going to tackle on this show. It is up to us to have these conversations because they will not have them on television. So the conversation starts and ends with you. And if you want a provocative t-shirt, a good icebreaker, a good way to start that conversation with the people around you, go to antitanktops.com, antitanktops.com. You can find this shirt and many others like it. And don't be afraid to wear it proudly on your sleeve. There are a lot of people walking around publicly advocating for war. Don't be afraid to publicly advocate for peace. If you like this content and want to see more like it, I ask you to hit the like and subscribe button. Most importantly, share it with your friends and get the conversation going. We are in a battle of information, and I ask you to join the fight. Thank you. Once again, I am the Y Guy, and I'll see you next time.